welcome to this video. My name is Shavong, and today we're going to be talking about an issue that seems to be concerning a lot of people in the LGBTQ community, even though it technically shouldn't, but it does. It concerns me too, which is why I'm here making a video about it. And that issue is labels. There's two things regarding labels that I'm going to be covering in this video. Point number one is people's issue with the use of labels. Point number two is people's issue with the number of labels. Without wasting any further time, let's get right into point number one. There are a lot of people out there within our community who try to make this argument that we shouldn't be using labels because A, cishet people never have to use them. B, we're all humans and we're not all that different from each other, and labels are anyway meant for objects, not humans, so stop using labels. Let's stop right here for a moment and take another moment to acknowledge a very basic fact, and that fact is that every single person on the face of this fucking planet is different from the next in one way or another. It could be very explicit differences like, say, your skin color or the way you look, or it could be subtler, more hidden differences, if you will, like our sexuality and gender identity. Differences that have a chance of going unnoticed if you don't tell people about them. And that is where labels come into play. Labels are what? Descriptive words. They're words with meanings which help us describe a certain quality about something or someone. And description is the only purpose that labels have. Regardless of how some other people might tend to treat it, their only purpose is description. That is it. That is all there is to labels. Labels basically help us communicate our identities better. Labels make it easier for other people to understand our identities because, like every other word, labels are embedded in our language. So at some point in life, because we all use language to talk and to express ourselves, people are going to learn about these labels and people are going to ultimately figure out what these labels mean, and these labels might very well help make us more visible to the rest of the world. Labels are literally the most convenient way out there to promote visibility. Sure, pride parades are great and all, but they're not exactly as convenient as just embedding our identities, words, or embedding words that describe our identities into our language. That's it. And I know that labels are the most convenient way to promote visibility because 10-year-old me found out that I wasn't the only gay guy on earth because of labels. I was growing up in a village when I was 10. Typically conservative folk, a lot of people didn't even know homosexuality was a thing, so they were definitely not willing to talk about it. They were not willing to talk about homosexual relationships or homosexual people. And whenever they mentioned relationships, they were definitely either platonic relationships or heterosexual relationships, and if they were talking about people, it was definitely straight people. In fact, at 6 years old, my dad asked me what kind of a wife I wanted. I'm sorry. Or actually not, I'm not sorry. But anyway, that was basically the conversation surrounding people's identities and relationships. It was by default a cishet setting. But even in that situation, people were willing to use the word gay. Not in good faith, obviously they were using it as an insult, but they were using it anyway. And the word gay was being seen in newspapers and magazines, and it was used by children in school, obviously to bully people, but it was being used. And at the end of hearing this word and seeing this word at so many places, what I had was the knowledge that this word exists, a little bit of context to it because I was reading and seeing the word and I could make out the meaning a little bit. I had a little bit of an idea about what this word probably meant because, I could read and I was seeing the kind of sentences that this word was being used in, but I still wasn't sure. What I also had at that time, though, was internet. Darn slow internet, but there was internet, and with a quick Google search, I found out that there are gay guys out there, and I wasn't the only one who felt this way. So, after finding that out, I took a little bit of comfort in knowing that I'm not the only gay guy on earth. Because nobody in my town was going to reinforce the fact that homosexual people exist. Definitely, at least not in a good way. So labels, the use of labels are what helped me figure out that I wasn't alone and made me feel comfortable with that fact. Now, let's now get into this argument, the first sub-argument, argument number A, that we shouldn't be using labels because cishet people never have to use them. I mean, I think this argument is bogus because there's a reason why cishet people never have to use their labels, and it's not rooted in the rejection of identities that are different. It's not rooted in the rejection of our community. It's rooted in a very simple fact, and the fact is that cishet people are the majority on Earth. Growing up, like I said, I was never told about homosexual people or transgender people or bi people or people who identified as anything but cishet. Cishet people were the only kind of people that other people were going to talk about. So, young me had this idea that everybody in the world was cishet, except me, of course. But yeah, I had that idea, and because we're in the situation where those kind of people are the majority, it's natural for anybody, even people within the community, to assume that the next person that they're going to be talking to is cishet. I do it all the time. A lot of you probably do it all the time too, unless you're told otherwise. And in that case, because cishet people's identities match and line up with other people's assumption about their identities, they don't really have anything to clarify. And because of that, they don't really have to use labels to describe their identities because people correctly assume their identities. But in case of LGBTQ people, our identities are different from the presumed narrative. And in that case, we need to communicate the fact that we are different from their presumed narrative, and we do that using labels. Like I said, labels are descriptive words. You use labels, you tell other people that, you know what, I'm different, and that's it. That's the end of it. So that is why LGBTQ people have to use labels that cishet people don't really have to, because the assumed identity for cishet people is exactly the same as their actual identity, and that changes when it comes to LGBTQ people, which is why we have to clarify that yes, we are different, and that different people exist on the face of this fucking planet, and we breathe the same air as those people. That's the end of my first sub-argument. Let's get into the second sub-argument, and that is that we shouldn't use labels because they're meant for objects, and we don't really need to label humans because we're not all that different. One, yes, we are different, because I already mentioned that in the beginning of this video. Two, we label humans all the time. Labels are mostly adjectives. And we use adjectives to describe people all the fucking time. When you look at a person and call them cute or attractive or hot or sexy, these all are labels. Granted that these labels depend on a person's perception of another person, but nevertheless, they are labels and they are used by us all the fucking time. We label humans all the time. So, nobody should be complaining about the use of labels because, again, they make it easier for us to describe a certain quality about something or someone. They make it easier for us to communicate the differences that we already know are there. And running away from labels and running away from our differences is not going to help eliminate those differences. It's only going to push those differences back into the shadows. So when you talk about rejecting labels, what you're essentially doing is you're inadvertently advocating for invisibility. And that invisibility is something that our community has been fighting for over 50 years now. So instead of rejecting labels, embrace our differences and embrace the words that we use to describe our differences and use more labels. Because frankly, labels make the world a better place for every fucking body, because it makes it easier for us to understand that people are different, and it makes it easier for us to understand what those differences are. And before we go into the second point, there's another point I want to make. A lot of people get very angry when people try to label other people, because why the fuck are you so upset with labels? Spoiler, we're not. People who try to label other people's identities are not doing it because they're obsessed with labels. We're doing it because we want to understand your identity better. I've said this 5 times in this video, but yeah, that is all. We want to understand your identity better. So instead of complaining about people who want to label you, appreciate the fact that they're making an effort to understand your identity and help them understand your identity better if the label they attach with you, the label they use for you, is inaccurate. Use labels and appreciate the people who want to understand your identity on the basis of those labels. Because, like I said, labels are part of language and labels are descriptive words, so everybody is going to want to use them at some point when they want to understand that identity of yours. Moving on, second point. People are taking an issue with the number of labels that are out there. I don't know why. Okay, actually I do know. The point is that a lot of people think that, you know what, the number of labels is getting ridiculous because there's just too many to keep up with. And a lot of people think that the labels that exist today are basically bullshit because 50 years ago none of this happened. And they also think that the identities that these labels describe are bullshit, again, because 50 years ago these identities technically didn't exist because the labels didn't exist. Now, for those people who think that way, I want to remind you that every single word that I used in this video was invented at some point. The entire English language, just like every other language, was invented at some point. And since their invention, every language has been evolving. That is why Shakespearean English and modern English are so fucking different. And with evolution comes the use of new words. When people figure out new things, when people discover new things, they will want to use new words to talk about them. They will want to make up new words to talk about them. So, a thing that was discovered 10 days ago will probably have a new word made up to describe it or explain it by people. And it's gonna be just as valid as a word that was made up 50 years ago to describe a thing that old. Which means that the label that came into existence just 10 days ago is exactly as valid as a label that has been in use for 50 fucking years. And the identity that these new labels describe didn't not exist. They were there, they were just invisible. Why were they invisible? Because again, people didn't have words to talk about those identities. See? Labels do a good job of explaining identities to other people and making those identities visible. Without labels, a lot of people were invisible to our own community. Because 50 years ago, the LGBT community was just that, LGBT, that's it. But now, it's LGBTQIA+, because now there are more identities that we know about because of the words that we use to talk about them. So, words and labels are important. And instead of complaining about the number of labels, appreciate the fact that people are making an effort to make new labels so that they can communicate their identities better and appreciate that effort and use more labels. And if you don't understand the meaning of a label, you're just a quick Google search away from understanding the meaning. So put in some effort yourself about understanding labels instead of complaining about them. That's it. That's my video. That's all I wanted to talk about. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching this entire video if you're here till the end. And yeah, see you next time, or actually see you in the comment section maybe. Bye!